Alrighty, so welcome to the Pandemic Pantry. I am Chef Chandler, and today we're going to be cooking with tea, which I'm really excited about. We did a cocktail class earlier today where we were mixing with tea, so I figured we would just follow through with the theme for the day, because if we're already buying ingredients for one thing, why not utilize them to their maximum ability? But before we get started, I just wanted to address that I know that the world is crazy and everybody is feeling pressured to respond in a lot of different ways, whether they're a company or an individual. And I just wanted to state that I'm aware there's many of you that have tuned in before and are feeling less interactive. And I know you all are being like creepers on Facebook, as y'all have said, and that's totally fine with me. I don't mind if you don't come in and join the Zoom. However, it does make it sometimes a little bit more difficult to answer your questions in real time. Juggling technology can be a little difficult for me. So if I do miss any questions you have, please feel free to reach out at any point after the class or try to drop comments in the Facebook. I'll be trying to pay attention to that on the live stream. But today we're making 3 really interesting dishes. And I know by changing the dynamic of doing just one dish and adding to the menu, it has made it a little bit more difficult to follow one thing at a time because we cook simultaneously. So I do post the recipes afterwards in the Underground Cooking Club and in the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour on Facebook. And we will just kind of cook as we go. If you do have any questions, you can reach out. One of the things I want to talk about today as we are cooking is how to be able to maximize our product. Because one of the things that we have cooking with tea is leftover leaves, or maybe we've brewed too much tea and we have leftover tea. So I definitely want to address that before we're done today. So the first dish that we're going to be making is something called Chinese tea eggs. It's a very simple recipe, but at the same time, it does require some effort. It's simple, but it doesn't take just 5 minutes. It does take a little bit of time. So if you are following along, what you will want to do, the recipe that I'm going to be giving you guys is for 4 eggs. If you are unfamiliar with tea eggs, it's a form of a hard-boiled egg that is marinated in a tea-based broth. And then it can be marinated anywhere from 12 hours to a couple days. And they absorb all of the flavor and this really beautiful design that I will show you here in a little bit. But the recipe that we're going to be doing is for 4 eggs. So you'll need 4 regular eggs. They don't have to be super large or anything in particular. Red or brown shell is fine. And then I'm using black tea. You can use any tea. Traditionally, a lot of people use jasmine tea or green tea. I just really prefer black tea because the design is a lot more noticeable because of the color of the tea. Flavor-wise, the taste is minimal because this recipe does have a lot of other ingredients. So you'll need, for 4 eggs, 1 tea bag. You will also need, let me bring up the recipe so I'm not looking behind me. You're going to need 2 teaspoons of soy. I have all my liquid and my dry ingredients measured out together. So in here, I have 2 teaspoons of soy sauce, a half a teaspoon of rice wine vinegar, and I added in, just as my own little perk, a half teaspoon of Szechuan wine, which is spelled with an X. So be sure to check out the recipe later. But it is not necessary. It just gives it a nice little added depth. You could use vermouth if you happen to have that at home. And then in my dry ingredients, I have 3/4 of a teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 bay leaf. However, mine are really small, so I'm using a few of them. I think I have 3 in here. And then 1 dried chili. These are just red dried chilies I got at my Asian store. I will look at the name afterwards and post it in the Facebook group. And then you would usually use half a teaspoon of 5-spice, Chinese 5-spice mix. However, I didn't have that on hand, so I'm making a makeshift 5-spice. 5-spice usually has fennel seeds, cinnamon, star anise, clove, and Szechuan pepper. I will definitely give you guys a recipe to follow so you can make your own 5-spice mix at home. However, I'm just using some cinnamon sticks that I had on hand, using pink peppercorn, and then some star anise. I didn't have clove or fennel seeds, so I'm going to just forego it. You can also do this with different teas, different spice blends. You could do maybe a chai tea instead of using the 5-spice, or you could use a green tea and maybe garam masala. Like there's a lot of different ways to customize this recipe. So those are my dry. These are my wet ingredients, my eggs and my tea bag. And then on the stove, I have 1 cup and a half, sorry, 1.5 cups of just regular water. So I'm going to put all of my broth ingredients in there. So that's everything I just mentioned except the eggs. So sugar, salt, bay leaf, cinnamon, your 5-spice or your pseudo 5-spice. And then I have my liquid ingredients, the shaoxing, the rice wine vinegar, and the soy. And I'm going to put this on a slow simmer on the stove. And then for the eggs, I'm going to bring a pot of water to a boil. We're going to carefully plate season and then reduce them to a simmer. So for now, I'm going to start heating the water, simmering the stock, and we'll move on to a different recipe until the water is ready for the eggs. Okay, so I'm going to put these on the stove. I'll be right back. All right, so while that is all starting to heat on the stove, I'll put on my tea bag. That goes in with the broth ingredients. Just gonna hold on to these eggs over here. And we're gonna continue on with a separate recipe while we're waiting. We're gonna do something called overnight oats. And a lot of people are familiar with the concept. Overnight oats are no cooking required, mix a bunch of ingredients in a bowl, let them sit overnight, and then basically your breakfast is ready to go in the morning because the oats will absorb all of the liquid that you stir into them. So what I wanted to do was take a recipe that a lot of people are familiar with that has a lot of room for adaptation and include tea because that's our theme today. So I'm going to be using this jar. This is a larger jar. The portion when I make it will seem a little small for this jar just because I'm only making 1 portion, but the recipe I'm going to read out is for 2. But you can do this in just a regular mason jar. You can do it in a Tupperware container. It just needs to be something that you can seal and put into your fridge. So for your recipe, you're going to need, for 2 portions, 2/3 cup of rolled oats. I'm actually using instant oats because it's just what I have. Pandemic means we have to be really savvy with what we can find. So rolled oats, not rolled boats. Rolled oats are best, but I have instant. And then I have vanilla yogurt. You can use milk, you can use cream, you can definitely use alternative milks such as soy or almond or hemp. I prefer yogurt just because it makes the final product nice and creamy instead of thinner. But people are different about which textures they prefer. So you can honestly use either. So you'll need 2/3 cups of oats. You'll need 1 cup of yogurt or milk substitute. You will need 2/3 cup of jasmine tea. Mine is a green tea. I brewed this ahead of time and it's cool now. So if you have tea at home, you can use any kind of tea, but the flavor will be there. I like floral teas just because I like putting honey on my oatmeal once it's done, and I feel like the floral notes of honey and the floral notes of the tea are really nice. So jasmine for me is a really nice choice. So I have jasmine green tea, and I have a little bit of salt because it'll balance out all the flavors. So this is really, really simple. You'll have your container. Do that so you can see it. And I'm going to get out a couple spoons here. So we're going to start with the oats. So our 2/3 cup of oats are going to go in our container. And then I'm going to go ahead and pour our tea onto there. So our 2/3 cup of tea is going to go on like that. So really simple recipe, guys. So simple. So many ways to give it different flavors. I chose vanilla yogurt. That way it will taste a little bit sweeter. The brain and our palate just relates vanilla to being a sweet flavor. But you could definitely use anything fruity. You could use just plain Greek yogurt. You can use low fat if you're on a special diet. Most people tend to just spoon out the yogurt, but if you've ever noticed, sometimes there's a little bit of liquid on the top. If you stir that in, it'll help give your yogurt the consistency that is a little creamier instead of super, super thick. So I'm going to add a cup of yogurt or whatever milk substitute you're using. And I measured this ahead of time. This is like an actual cup, so it's fantastic. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to just do about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. It's a little bit more than a pinch. And then you're just going to stir. Like I said, super easy. You do want to make sure you get all the nooks and crannies. Stir until it's all uniform. And it should just kind of look like oats before they go into the pot. Or no, sorry, as they're in the pot before they're like cooked and done. So as you can see, it's really nice and creamy. It's not incredibly thick, but it is very oatmeal-like. And so that is all of our ingredients in it for now. There are a lot of ways to modify this right now. You can add in chia seeds, poppy seeds. Some people like to muddle fruit. Go ahead and put that in there. My favorite recommendation though is add anything you want into this process here, like at this step. You can add in your cinnamon or your chia seeds or anything else, but if you go ahead and muddle fruit, then this won't last as long. So say you want to like batch these for the week. These do really well up to about 4 days in the fridge. You want to make sure they sit for at least 4 hours to hydrate the oats, but they can go overnight or like I said, up to 4 days. So the one I have that I'm going to show you like movie magic, that one's been sitting for about 18 hours now because I made it yesterday afternoon and now it's evening time over here in Texas. So this one will just go in the fridge now and I'll eat this tomorrow, but I'll show you what it looks like now. After sitting, ta-da! Let's see it fast, right? Let's check on our water. Our broth is simmering, guys. I'm going to bring it all over to the stove in just a moment so you guys can see where everything is. But these are what the oats look like once they're done. As you can see, they are quite creamy, taking a while to kind of move around. So now, once you've done your oats, you get to go crazy with toppings. So I'm going to just show you how I eat mine in the morning. When I do overnight oats, I'm obsessed with blackberries. They remind me of my childhood in Texas. So I like to put layered berries on there. Makes me feel so healthy. I have some pecans, also a Texas favorite, that I've just kind of roughly broken up. Didn't even go through a whole lot of chopping. And I have some honey that I infused with the same tea that I put into the oatmeal. So I took this honey, heated it very, very lightly in my microwave, and then let it sit with a tea bag. The same green jasmine tea. And I'm going to let that just kind of drizzle all over my oatmeal. Just beautiful. And this is also a really nice way to showcase like single flavor honeys. Like if you like orange blossom, or perhaps there's a mesquite smoked honey they have in my grocery store, which is really nice. I'm going to drizzle my honey. And then I really like bee pollen on certain things, and I don't ever use it quite enough. I actually forgot I had this before I was setting up my mise en place for the class. But that, guys, is overnight oats. And it's one portion, really nice and healthy. I'm getting all of my fiber, my vitamins, my minerals, all the nutrients. And it's just good to go. So I definitely don't recommend putting on the toppings until you're ready to eat it. But I can actually eat this right after my class and it'll still be fun. So I'm going to put that back in the fridge. We're going to travel to the stove. Just so you guys know, I do accept tips on Venmo. This is my Venmo handle at CTOMAYKO, which is my last name. I'm going to go ahead and move that right now. Just makes it kind of harder to move my laptop. But my stove, guys. Let's get y'all set up here. So we have a lot of things going. We have our simmering egg broth for the tea eggs. And then as you can see, our water over here is bubbling nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully, preferably using a slotted spoon like this, we're going to lower our eggs into the water so that they don't crack. Okay. And then we're going to lower our water to a simmer. So I've already prepared some of these ahead of time for our other recipe so you guys can see how they turn out, because they do have to marinate for about 12 hours. But once we get this to a little simmer, this is good. If you want soft boiled eggs, you want to do 5 minutes. Medium boiled eggs would be 7 minutes. Hard boiled eggs would be 10. The ones I made that I will show you in a little bit are soft boiled because we'll be using them in the ramen that we're going to make here in a minute. But these ones, because I want to snack on them later, I'm going to let them be a medium. So I'm going to put my timer on for 7 minutes. 6, 7. Okay. And a little trick, if you are going to be making these to serve as like a hard-boiled egg, for the first couple minutes, for the first 2 or 3 minutes, give or take, if you just kind of slowly swirl them about just a little bit, it'll help the yolks stay nice and centered, which will help you if you want to make deviled eggs or if you want them to look really uniform and pretty. And then this is our broth over here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. One of my favorite things to do, though, just so you guys know, is to make about 3 times the amount of broth that you'll see in the recipe that I'm going to put online later. And the reason I do that is because once I pour enough of the marinade over the eggs, then I take peanuts, and you can do roasted peanuts or you can do raw peanuts. Raw peanuts take a lot longer to cook, but then I like to simmer them in the remaining broth so that I can have a little additional add-on to my snack. So then I have roasted Asian peanuts or roasted tea peanuts and Chinese tea eggs. So we've been swirling those for about 2 minutes now, so I think that's pretty good. We're going to leave those there. And then one of the keys is to be able to bring these eggs down to a cooler temperature quickly. So in this bowl that I have here, I'm going to prepare an ice water bath, which just means I'm going to take ice from my freezer, put some water over it. I like to sprinkle a little salt, which helps lower the temperature of the water a lot faster. And then once the timer goes off for the eggs, I'm going to strain them and put them in this bowl. So y'all keep an eye on this, make sure it doesn't boil. Y'all can yell at me if it does. I'm going to put some ice and some water in this bowl, and I'll be right back. All right, thanks for watching that. So this is almost a little bit too vigorous of a boil. I like to keep them at a little bit lower, at least for the tea eggs. So I'm going to bring that back down. Got my ice bath, got this. We're going to be making ramen here in a bit, and I know my pot is really, really tall, and it's hard to see inside with my laptop. So I'll be rotating it like so you guys can see what we're doing over here. But this is a really nice way to make eggs. What we're going to end up doing after we strain them into the ice, I'll walk you guys through it, but we're going to crack them all over without taking the shells off, and then they're going to marinate in this really pretty broth. And there's different techniques that we'll go over, but I like to marinate mine for no less than 12 minutes. 12 hours. Definitely not 12 minutes. I wouldn't do very much. So no less than 12 hours. I think they're ideal after about 2 to 3 days. It just kind of depends on what you're going to be using them for. The ones that I made last night in preparation for the class, I'll be using in the ramen today. So I was more interested in the visual appeal rather than just the flavor. However, the ones that I'm going to be making right now with y'all, I will definitely be leaving those marinating for at least 2 days. And then I'm going to proceed to make basically kind of like a deviled egg snack with them. But so these eggs have, let's see, another 4 minutes. So in the meantime, I'm going to put a little bit of oil in our ramen pan. And you can use any oil. or fat. You can use coconut oil. I'm using olive oil. You can use vegetable oil, butter. My favorite ramen hack or udon hack is to basically make the broth that I'm going to run you guys through, but I usually like to put it in a slow cooker. And I'll let it cook for about 12 hours, or if I have it on high, maybe about 6, and just really let all of those flavors come together. But we're gonna do the quick and dirty ramen. I'll be using udon noodles today, but I've made this with instant ramen noodles, just like the top ramen, and it works out really, really well. So I'm gonna heat our oil over here. Eggs have another 2.5 minutes. So as you can see, this broth is really nice and brown. It looks like actual tea. The smell, it smells very strongly of tea, which is always surprising to me because of all the other elements, right? You have pepper, you have spicy chilies, you have cinnamon, but if you use the right tea, it really comes through. You could also do a much softer flavor profile, especially if you plan to marinate the eggs for longer than 12 hours, where you could choose a green tea or a floral tea, and then choose spices or herbs or even vegetables that would kind of enhance that. So you could do a green tea with citrus peel and maybe some lighter herbs such as basil or bay leaf. You could also do really spicy, where you go with a black tea like this, or maybe a rooibos, which is a really nice earthy flavored tea, and use a bunch of different spicy chilies and pepper powders and really go that route. So there's just so many different ways to approach tea eggs. There really, really are. And I really look forward to hearing what everybody does with their tea eggs, how these turn out for you guys. These are a street food in China, and in China, they tend to cook the eggs like this, crack them, and then cook them again in the broth. And that leads to a rubbery egg, which is not a texture that I'm really fond of. So this is the method that I prefer, where you get a really nice hard-boiled egg or medium-boiled or soft-boiled egg, but you still get all the flavor. So it takes a little longer because we have to marinate it, but the texture is way better. So our medium eggs are just about ready. I'm going to say about 30 seconds. Tick, 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 tick. Almost there. 7 minutes. All right. I'm going to turn this off. Very carefully take these eggs, put them directly into our ice bath, just like that. And you want to let these sit in there for at least 2 minutes. You can do it a little bit longer, but definitely not less. So I'm going to move this so we don't have hot water go everywhere. Okay. So I'm going to move these over to our prep station. Our broth is going to stay here. Let me bring y'all back to the original table we had. There's the countertop. There are the eggs, guys. Put that back up there in case anybody's looking for it. So when it comes to the eggs, they need to marinate in a way that they can be fully covered. So a lot of people like to use containers, but depending on the container you use, the broth you made may not be enough. So you can always get the broth to cover it if you do it in a Ziploc bag. So these are the ones that I made before the class. And because I can take out all that air, all the eggs, but you can definitely use a Tupperware container like I'm using now. And there's 2 different techniques to making the eggs cracked all over. So one would be the table crack method, and the other one would be the spoon crack method. And they just look different. It's definitely personal preference. There's not one that's really better than the other. However, if you've ever peeled a hard-boiled egg, sometimes there's like that little membrane, and it'll come off with the shell all at once. Sometimes it kind of stays on the egg and you either leave it there because it's edible or you like take the shell off and then are like picking pieces of the membrane off. Oh, we have a guest. Let's bring on the noob. So with tea eggs, I wouldn't say the problem, but what ends up happening is if you only marinate them for 12 hours, the marinade will make it through just to the membrane. So if you want a stronger flavor and a prettier pattern on your eggs, then you definitely would want to marinate them longer, or as I'll show you with the ones that I've already done, you're going to want to be really, really careful in trying to take just the shell off and leave the membrane. And that's really nitpicky. So I just say marinate them longer, save yourself some work. So our eggs properly chilled now. So I'm going to take them out of the water, put them in this little container, and I'll get rid of this ice bath and show you some techniques. So table crack method, my personal favorite, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You take an egg against your table or your countertop. I like to start with both ends of the egg, give them a nice light tap, and then just kind of tap the egg all over and crack the shell so that it ends up all cracked, and you can kind of see how I can kind of compress the shell here. I'm going to do that again with the second one. Again, I like to do the tips and then just kind of crack all over the egg. It doesn't have to be even. Part of the beauty is that they are irregular.
I'm late to the game, but you were just using the table crack method I heard from off screen. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like, I don't know, I'm just super old school about things because I'm used to being in situations where I don't have tools. So the spoon crack method, and I'll tell you why I'm not super particular about this, but you take any spoon. Usually this is a little bit large. For the one I'm going to show you guys that I finished, I used like a teaspoon. But you just take the egg in your hand and ever so carefully smack it. So you just basically spank the egg all over with your spoon until you feel like it's cracked enough. And quite honestly, on first glance, they look the same. But the reason I don't like the spoon method as much is because if you are doing soft boiled eggs, this tends to damage the membrane inside a lot more than the table crack method. So if you don't marinate them a really long time, the membrane will come all the way off and you won't get the pretty design. So we have our cracked eggs, and I know they just look white on camera. Let's see if you guys can see that they're cracked. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So they're all cracked. They all look like that. And in this container here, I'm going to take our broth, our tea broth, and just pour it directly over the eggs. You can pour it warm, you can pour it cold. It's not really a big difference. You just want to make sure they're as submerged as possible. Now, if they are not fully covered, as they are not in this case, they would be in the Ziploc bag. So that's why I was trying to explain that it was better. But if y'all can see, there's a little bit of the eggs peeking out just on the very top. That means every so often I'm going to need to open the container and just kind of rotate the eggs around. So I'm going to put the lid on those. Those will go in the fridge here in a little bit as they cool down. But just so you guys can see what we're going for, and this is my favorite part, this is what your tea eggs should look like. They're so very pretty. It's like a mosaic of flavor all over your egg. And now this one, the first one that I was showing you, is a table cracked egg. And there are certain parts where the membrane started to come off because, as you can see, these are really, really nice and soft because I made them for the ramen. So the membrane was really having a hard time sticking. In my spoon cracked egg, the membrane came all the way off. And you can tell this is the membrane absorbing the marinade. This is without the membrane having absorbed the marinade. So if this had soaked longer, then it would look like this egg. But they're both going to taste delicious, which is the important part. This just looks so pretty. Isn't that gorgeous? Just so nice looking. So I'm going to hold on to those. And we're going to get prepared to make our ramen. And I say ramen very loosely. Definitely not the class to be a stickler about if ramen or udon or any of those are all the same. They're not. I really love udon noodles just because they're really nice and thick and they like absorb a lot of flavor. Plus, I found a really awesome brand at my Asian store where they come in this like vacuum sealed pack for $1 and they taste super fresh. But you could honestly just use like every chef's go-to instant ramen noodles. Like any noodle will do. You could use glass noodles. You could use regular pasta if you really wanted to. But we have a lot of ingredients. So for our ramen, we are using a super awesome tea today that I adore. It's called Mai Cha. And what Mai Cha is toasted green tea, and then it has toasted rice and popped rice kernels in it. So it doesn't usually come in tea bags, it comes loose. So I have this little sachet that I have filled with the green tea. Let's see if I can get it back open. So I'd love to show you guys this tea. So it is a loose leaf tea. It smells really roasty and a lot like grains. I'm gonna put a little bit in my hand. So the tea leaves are super, super flat. And then it's got these little kernels that are like brown, and that's going to be the toasted rice. And then there's little puffy white kernels that, depending on where you buy it, are either amaranth or popped rice. So it's a very unique tea, and I thought it would be really nice to cook with. So that's going to be for our ramen. If you don't have Mai Cha, because you're not a crazy person like me that buys a lot of things I can't pronounce, just use green tea or black tea or any other tea. But I really like this one. So this is green tea based. So if you have green tea, it'll be similar. So for 4 portions of ramen, I have 4 cups of broth. I have the equivalent of 4 tea bags. So if you have loose leaf tea, that's going to be 4 tablespoons. And you don't necessarily have to have a sachet bag like I do. You could use red. Technical difference with these guys. This is definitely too small for 4 tablespoons. But this is a loose leaf tea infuser that you can just use in like to make a cup of tea. They sell a lot of these online. They have all kinds of different shapes and sizes that are really fun to play with. But you could definitely use this. Or you can also just, if you have cheesecloth, you can make a little pouch, put that in there. There's lots of different ways to do it. But if you don't have the ability to definitely make a sachet, then just use any bagged tea that you have. So then, if you have prepared to cook along with me, then you should have most of this already diced already. But for 4 portions, we have 4 cups of broth, 4 tea bags. We have 2 teaspoons of grated ginger, 4 teaspoons of minced garlic. I have 1 onion that I've diced up nicely. I also have 2 carrots that I've diced up nicely. And then you're going to use, I like to put like all my liquids in the same place. It just makes it easier to kind of put them in. So I have 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and then I like to add in a little sesame oil, especially when I'm using this tea. I like the nuttiness that it adds to the ramen. So I used 2 teaspoons of sesame oil. And then I'm using udon noodles, but y'all can use ramen. I chose mussels because I had some in the freezer, so I'm making a seafood-based ramen. And then I had this anime-looking ingredient that I love to serve because people that watch a lot of anime get all excited. It's called fish cake, and it looks super artificial. It is bright, stinking pink with this white little swirl inside. But if you've ever had flake crab or like a California roll, crab with a K, it's a similar process, but this is actually made from fish. You could use tofu, chicken, sausage, really thinly sliced beef. Today, I'm using mussels and fish cake. And then I have a few little extra ingredients that I'm adding just because I like it. So I'm adding in some bean sprouts. I'll be garnishing with some really finely chopped green onion. I have wakame, which is the seaweed that is used in miso soup, so dried seaweed. And then I have furikake, which is a seasoning mix. And then I have these really lovely shiitake mushrooms. And I bought these dehydrated So I rehydrated them in the same tea I'm going to use for the broth to just kind of carry that flavor throughout our dish. So I'm going to return you to the stove and we're going to make some udon / ramen / deliciousness for dinner. So follow me. I need to learn the song from Willy Wonka, Come With Me and You'll Be, because I always forget the words. So our oil is over here heating on the stove. Our tea broth over here. And I'm going to slowly bring most of the ingredients that we just talked about over to the stove. So honestly, you could put all of these ingredients minus the meat that you want to use in the noodles in your slow cooker, like I mentioned before. Just let it simmer all day. Or if you don't have a slow cooker, in a pot, let it simmer on the lowest possible setting all day. Me personally, I like to saute my vegetables as I go. I feel like the flavor of the broth and the soup in and of itself is better just because it has time to develop different depths. So that's what we're going to do. But the cheater way is definitely put it all in, simmer it, and it still tastes beautiful. So with my oil being warm, one of the first ingredients I'm going to end up adding in is my onion. I'm just slowly going to bring all my mise en place over here. And if you've been paying attention or tuning into my classes, you know mise en place is key. And mise en place just means having all of your ingredients already chopped and ready to go. So then you're not scrambling to make something at the last minute and then hoping that everything stays on board. So our oil is nice and hot. Put in our onion. Beautiful. And if you throw anything into a pot or a skillet and you don't hear that sizzle, yeah, that's sexy. Your pot's too cold or your oil's too cold, and that is not good because then things sweat. And we want to saute, not sweat. So our onions are in there sauteing really nicely. We're going to give them about a minute to a minute and a half. The mushrooms and the sprouts. Right. Like I said, the recipe ratios that I'm going to be putting online later and that I'm talking about right now are for 4 portions. I have a roommate and I live with my boyfriend, so I always make like a little bit extra in case we're all a little hungry. And the best way to do this, honestly, is to do all of the broth without any of the meats in the noodles. And then you can actually just portion it out, right? So you can take this, say you live alone and you want to make the 4 portions, then divide it into 4 into separate containers, put it in the freezer, and then you can just pull them out and put them with the instant ramen noodles in the microwave or in a pot really quick, or pull out, some leftover rotisserie chicken maybe that you had from when you went shopping. And that's a really good way to kind of prepare ahead of time, because it's honestly just about the same amount of work to make 4 portions as it is to make 1. So I've got my onion. I'm going to add in my garlic. About 30 seconds to a minute. So we're going to keep doing this up and down. So now we've got garlic and onion. And that's all sauteing in there. And I was going to make this in a much larger flat pan, but the quantity of things that we're going to go in there wouldn't have fit. So this is where we are, guys. It smells so good. And it's just onion and garlic right now, but it smells so very good. So once we have onion and garlic, I have finely grated fresh ginger. It gets really almost like a paste. I'm going to put that in there. That's entirely optional. As are all of these ingredients, really. If you don't like garlic, don't put it in. If you like bell peppers, put those in. Go crazy, man. You could also use powdered ginger if you don't have ginger, but you like the flavor. Yeah, I'm going to let that saute a little bit. Give it also about 30 seconds. And we like to kind of take our time in between putting each ingredient in, even if it's only a minute, because that'll allow that ingredient to set forth a base of its flavors for a different flavor to come in and build up on that. Think of it like Legos, right? If we take our time, we can kind of build a tower, but if we just kind of throw them all together, it's just going to fall. It won't be as nice of a structure. So now I'm going to put in my carrots. And as you can see, I just kind of dice those. They're not too big, not too small. Put those in. You could use parsnips, you could use squash. You could not use any of those. You could not use any carrots. It's a good way to get your nutrients though. And you don't have to cut them like this either. You could do slices. You could do little juliennes, which are little sticks. So now we've got carrots, onion, garlic, ginger. Cooking. Delicious. So good. So carrots are tougher though. They take a while to soften up and cook. But because we're adding in liquid and this is a soup, they'll have that time to really cook in our simmering amount of liquid. So I'm going to still give them though about 2 minutes, maybe 3. Let them start to release a little bit of their sweetness. Coat those onions and that garlic, really come together with that ginger. And then in the meantime, while I'm waiting for those to cook, like I said, I have my little mushrooms over here. And as you can tell, see that liquid as my finger goes down? They're still sitting in that tea. So most things that are dehydrated, they'll tell you to soak them for 20 to 30 minutes, good to go. But what I like to do to make sure they're nice and plump, I soaked these in warm Mai Cha tea for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I took them out and sliced them and put them back into the liquid. So they'll just continue to plump. But I don't want to use that liquid for my actual recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and strain this liquid out while I'm waiting for my carrots to kind of cook down a little bit. Okay. Put some there. All right, so now no liquid, just the mushrooms. And you don't have to use shiitake mushrooms. Sometimes you can find them fresh. If you like mushrooms, but you can't find shiitake, then my next option would either be cremini or portobello, just because shiitake have a very distinctive, earthy, dark flavor. Whereas like white mushrooms are kind of just blander in comparison. You could use enoki mushrooms, which are the Japanese mushrooms that look similar to a bean sprout. They're like tiny and thin with a little bitty mushroom head on the top. Or you could just forego mushrooms. Some people don't like mushrooms. Also, those people are probably crazy. But all right, our carrots are in there, really nice and caramelizing. I'm gonna go ahead and pour in first the liquids that I've pre-measured. So this is the soy sauce, rice wine vinegar, sesame oil. Pour that right in there. Stir it around. Now it's just going to let the carrots absorb a little bit of that saltiness, almost a way to season them without adding too much. Okay. Patting those down in there. So it's, you want to try and keep these on one layer as long as possible, just so everything's cooking evenly. And I have these on a medium-high heat. So once the liquids I put in there are starting to bubble just a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my broth. Now you can use water, but why would we do that if we have things that have flavor? I'm gonna use vegetable broth. I could use a seafood broth because I'm making a seafood udon. You can use chicken, beef, whatever you want. We'll go ahead and put all 4 cups in there. And then this wouldn't be tea cooking class if we didn't put in the tea. So directly, once we have our liquid in there, we're going to drop our tea. And I can just put this in there as is and pull it out later. That's why I love these little sachets. Put that in there. And I'm going to let that come to a nice little simmer. So there's a lot of things we can add to this. A lot of broths that are made for these kinds of Asian soups have miso paste. Sometimes they have specialty broths that you can buy that are like a paste or a dehydrated powder that you then hydrate at home. For example, say a pho. And those are all very, very nice. However, sometimes tea can be a very delicate flavor profile. So using stronger flavored bases might not allow your tea to shine through. So for me, I like to try to keep it as simple as possible and then adjust all of the flavors on my own rather than using a base that you can already find. And one of the other things you want to not do is season too early, because a lot of the ingredients we're using have a natural salinity. So like if you do use fish cake, look at that, that's crazy looking. If you do use fish cake like I'm using, or say you use fake crab, or perhaps use sausage, some of those things that are more of a prepared meat have salt and other flavorings added. So if you season your broth too quickly, as in if you seasoned it now and then put in those meats, then your final product might be overly seasoned. And it's always, always easier to add than it is to take away. So if we've done all this beautiful work of building flavors, of letting everything come together, and then we ruin it by too much seasoning and then have to water it down, then we're going to lose all of that wonderful work we've done. So this is going to leave, we're going to leave this here simmering, and then we're going to go back over to the prep table and talk a little bit about tea.
Chandler, quick question. Is a lot of that going to reduce a little bit?
So yeah, go ahead.
Is a lot of that going to reduce? My friend is not in the Zoom chat, right? Our friend Noelle, she's watching on Facebook, and she's being a creeper. And she was just commenting to me that what you're doing seems like a lot of broth for this recipe, and I don't know if that's going to reduce or not.
Okay, so yes and no. It kind of depends on the noodles that we have, right? So you'll see my noodles are really, really thick. So these will absorb some of the liquid because I'm going to cook my noodles directly in the broth that we're making. If you were going to use like instant ramen noodles, then definitely too much broth, and you could let it simmer, let it reduce, and all those flavors would be equally as beautiful, if not more. But don't season it until after it's reduced. Me personally, I love Asian soups because they allow me to be a fat kid but still be healthy kind of. So I like them extra brothy, just because then I get to slurp all of my liquid like a child and then still feel super satisfied. But if you ever have too much broth, you can always take it, freeze it, reduce it down. It's just a personal preference. I like mine brothy. Some people don't like it as brothy. So this one, because we're doing it quick and dirty, is maybe going to cook for about 10 minutes. So it's not going to reduce down a whole lot. But if I was going to do this in like my slow cooker or do it the slow and easy way, then it would definitely reduce down at least a quarter of the volume, if not half. Just depends on the heat that you apply. It's a great question, though.
Awesome.
Miss Noelle gets brownie points and a like pseudo gold star because I don't have any stickers. But yeah, so great question. I love questions. I don't think any question is silly, just so everybody knows. But so some more information I'm going to just kind of give you guys to work with while we're waiting for that to reduce is if you want to make your own 5-spice blend for the tea eggs, then this is what I recommend as a base. You can add more or less of any of these ingredients depending on how you like your flavor profiles to be. But a general good base would be 6 anise stars, like the little stars of anise. I think I have it over here. They look like this. So you want at least 6 of these. A whole star will have about 6 to 8 little prongs on it. So if there's like only 4, that means it's probably about a half of a star. However, if you have ground star anise, then you would want to use 2 tablespoons. And then you're going to use 2 tablespoons of fennel seed, 1 big cinnamon stick, or 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of Szechuan peppercorns, which can be kind of hard to come by. They're not the same as regular pepper. They have a certain quality that makes them kind of numb your tongue with the amount of heat they have. Not that you won't be able to talk like going to the dentist, but They do have a more sensory aspect to them than regular pepper, but you can use regular pepper. And then 1.5 teaspoons of whole cloves or 1.25 teaspoons of ground cloves. And it's important to remember that it's really all well and good to do this with whole spices, but if you're going to use it to season like a chicken or something that would require it in a powdered form, not everyone has the equipment to break up cinnamon sticks, which are incredibly hard, or star anise or cloves. So sometimes a coffee grinder will be good enough. Sometimes you'll need a specialty spice grinder. So that's why I wanted to make sure everyone has the whole versus the ground spice ratios. And then, hold on, let me check our water. Oh, okay. Coming along really nicely. It smells delicious in here, guys. So then the other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm gonna go ahead and sit with you guys for a minute, is ways we can use tea once we have brewed it, or ways we can use tea that I'm maybe not covering in this class. So most people don't think to cook with tea, at least in the US, it's not really a big part of North American or United States culture, but it's such a subtle flavor, and it's so delicate. A lot of people have trouble trying to figure out how we can use it. So I'm gonna give you guys some of my favorite ways to do that. So smoking, absolutely adore smoking with tea. You would use it the same way you would wood chips. However, you just wouldn't soak them. So most wood chips require you to soak them and then kind of toss them onto warm coals or ashed over coals in your grill or your smoker. If you just have loose leaf tea or a tea bag that you cut open, causing you to have loose leaf tea, you can sprinkle those over the warm coals and it will smoke whatever is in your grill or smoker. And smoking with tea is really, really nice. It's not as acrid of a flavor, not as woody as wood chips. It's definitely different. It definitely requires much more. I highly recommend smoking softer proteins that are quicker to cook first when you're learning how to do this, just so you can kind of see how much tea smoke adds how much flavor. So definitely start with fish or seafood skewers, like shrimp kebabs or chicken, before you move on to maybe beef. But smoking, great way to use tea leaves. Pastry has wonderful applications. If you take them, if you have loose leaf tea or a tea bag that you open up and you grind it really, really fine, you can use it as you would any other baking spice. So you can use it in lieu of cinnamon or allspice or pumpkin pie spice or whatever it is you're putting in your cookies. Instead of maybe lemon zest cookies, maybe you make Earl Grey with grapefruit zest. Or instead of a buttermilk pie, maybe you make it infused with a jasmine tea. There's just a lot of different ways to use tea in pastry. Another application would be seasonings. So if you take the tea leaves are edible. It's a plant that we are able to eat. And there's so many different kinds of tea. You have rooibos, which is really earthy, green tea, which is really, really grassy. You have black tea, which can range from smoky to woody to nutty. And all of those, when mixed with different salts or peppers or herbs, work beautifully on loins, like pork loins, not your own personal loins, or beef steaks, all those different ways of like the way you would use a spice rub. Those are also really nice. I love composed butters, which is where you take regular butter, let it come to room temperature, mash a bunch of ingredients into it, like minced garlic or reduced whiskey, like we've talked about before, or in this case, ground up tea, and then put the butter back in the fridge, allowing it to, solidify again into its cold form, and then use it to spread on an English muffin or a steak or waffles and just kind of amp up your game a little bit, especially for breakfast. It's very, very nice. It's wonderful in stock, which is definitely the application we're using today. We're using it to add an extra layer of flavor to a stock that otherwise would still be good, but this just kind of adds that whole je ne sais quoi, but it's delicious to anything. They're like, hey, I know you really liked my ramen. Did you know it had tea in it? And just blow people's minds. So there's that. And then also one of the other techniques I did today with you guys is rehydration. So if you have dried fruits, such as cranberries or apricots or even dried apples, and you put them in pastry, going back to that topic, or maybe you put them on your oatmeal, like the oatmeal we had today, or mushrooms like we're using in this udon slash ramen. It's a really nice way to just add a little bit of extra flavor to something that you're already going to most likely hydrate in water. So my favorite combination of all the techniques that I just mentioned is rehydrating dried cranberries in a really flavorful tea, such as a lapsang, which is like smoked, or a rooibos, which I've mentioned is earthy, and then soak those cranberries, those dried cranberries in that, and then use them in like a cranberry upside down cake. And it is so good, so simple. Also, a lot of people buy tea and then forget they have it or don't know how to use it or feel old, so they don't want to drink it. So different ways to use tea in kitchen applications. I'm gonna bring you guys back over the stove. I hear bubbles. Steamy. So we're gonna go ahead and give it a little taste, see where we're at flavor-wise. Our tea bag is still floating in there. We have all of these. And just to bring it back to like the quantity of liquid, because Miss Noelle was asking about if it's gonna reduce, this is only 4 cups of broth. So that sounds like a lot, but when you put 1 cup of broth on top of noodles, that's relatively a normal portion. Depending on like your bowl, of course, like a regular cereal bowl might be a little too small, but it's still a good amount of broth. Let's see what we're doing here. Let's see, I'm gonna see if you guys can see what I'm seeing. Doubtful. There's a little bit of an oil slick on top of the broth, and that's because of the sesame oil that I've added. Oh, that is so good, guys. It's really interesting. It's kind of hard to explain if you haven't had Mai Cha. But I'm getting all the flavors. I'm getting sweetness from the carrot. There's like an herbal tone that if no one knew you used tea, they would wonder what herbs you used. But we didn't really use any herbs, as you saw. So it's literally just coming from the tea. And then because we're using Mai Cha and it has the toasted rice in there, there's this depth as if this has been cooking a lot longer than it has. So I'm going to leave that tea bag in there still. And then we're going to go ahead and add in some more ingredients. We're going to add in our shiitake mushrooms. Those in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in wakame. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot. That's like a half of a shot glass. But this expands a lot and it absorbs liquid because it needs to expand. So if we put too much in here, I don't know if anyone's ever cooked with like regular mushrooms in a saute, and then you toss them into your pan that you're like maybe stir frying things into, and then all of the liquid dries up. That's kind of what's going to happen if you don't have enough liquid for this. So we're only going to use a little bit. So I'm going to pour that in there. All right, stir that around. And then we're going to put in this crazy looking fish cake. And they don't all look this crazy. Some of them are all white. Some of them are all pink. Pink is definitely the most common color. Asian cultures are just kind of funny the way they do things. They really like things to have a very large visual impact. Sometimes that's done through technique, such as cutting things really thin, like sushi and the fish that they use on that. Sometimes it's done with really vibrant colors, like the fish cake. Sometimes it's done by really over-the-top garnishes, if you've ever looked at like Japanese cocktails or fruit salads even. But me personally, I'm not huge into anime, but I know a lot of my friends are, and they don't get to eat udon a lot. I ate a lot of it when I lived in Hawaii. And if you ever see ramen or udon in anime, it always, always, always has the bright pink fish cake. So I like to put it in there because it makes people feel like they're part of a TV show. Plus it tastes good. It's not like super, super fishy. It's very similar in flavor to the artificial crab that you get at the store. Then we stir that around. I'm gonna put in our bean sprouts. All right, we got that in there. And our mussels. And now these mussels come already cooked. So does the fish cake. So that's also why I'm waiting to put them in until last. They don't really need a whole lot of time, maybe a few minutes. And then I know we've talked about volume a lot. So you guys to kind of see, let me see if I can juggle this. So now that all these other ingredients are in there, you can see like the ratio of water to ingredients is not as soupy as we originally thought. All right, so I'm gonna let that in there. Then we're gonna get our noodles. So these come in a little packet with a little seasoning package as well, just like instant ramen. But those seasoning packets are so high in sodium and artificial flavoring. We usually just toss them and put them aside and just use the noodles. Or if you want to, you can save the packets from your instant ramen or your instant udon like this and use them next time you're breading chicken or next time you want to amp up your mac and cheese. They're just seasoning packets. They don't have to be for ramen and udon. And these noodles take about 3 minutes to cook. They're vacuum sealed, so it looks like a tiny little square brain. That like the noodles are quite thick comparatively to ramen noodles. So I'm going to stick those in there as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and fish out my tea bag. I'm going to press as much liquid as I can out of it. Because all that tea flavor is just sitting in that bag. So I'm going to put that over there to the side. Alrighty. I'm going to let that cook. Bring y'all back over to our prep station. We do a lot of traveling in this class, guys, especially when we do more than one dish. I'm going to show you one of my favorite pieces of dishes that I have. If you haven't been to your local Asian store, go. Then you get to like also buy dishes that are gigantic or the size of your face. And this is what I like to eat my ramen in, because this allows you to smell all the things, kind of like a big red wine glass instead of the narrow champagne glasses. All of the aromas will hit you at once, and it's beautiful. You also have a lot of space to see everything rather than them being in like a cramped regular cereal bowl. So I do this dish a lot at home. As you can tell, I have a ramen bowl. I have a ramen spoon. I also have way too many chopsticks because I got a box of like, I don't know, 10 sets for $2. Asian stores are great, guys. And if you don't know how to read the labels, most people will be able to find an employee that can help you that works there, but sometimes it's a really good idea to just kind of see if there's a translation on the label on the back, or take a picture of it and then upload it to Google Images instead of just Google Search, and you'll be able to find more information about what that item is. I like to go to Asian stores where almost no one speaks English because they usually have a larger variety of products. The one that I go to happens to also be a restaurant supply store that regular people can go and shop at. So they've got a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah, while we're waiting for those noodles to finish cooking, which should be maybe another minute or two, what we can do with leftover tea. So as y'all saw, I took that little tea sachet out of that broth, and most people would just toss it, but there's a lot of stuff you could do with it if you're trying to maximize bang for your buck, or you're just trying not to be as wasteful. You can add it into already cooked. You can still add it into like another batch of water and use it for like a foot soak. You can put it into a face mask. I wouldn't necessarily use the one that we just used in the ramen, but definitely the tea bag left over from maybe the oatmeal, because it's just tea. It hasn't soaked up mushrooms and carrots and seafood. But yeah, it's really good for spa treatments at home. You can also take the tea leaves out of the tea bag, dry them in the sun on your patio, on your windowsill, outdoors if you have a yard, and then you can put them inside shoes, and it'll help you get rid of the bad odor. You can put them on like a candle that you're burning outside if you're having an outdoor day, and it'll be a bug repellent naturally. You can also put them in a little container uncovered in your fridge, and it'll absorb bad food odors the way baking soda does. So that's really cool. You can also cook the tea leaves again in a new batch of water, and then that second brewing water is fantastic for cleaning mirrors and windows. And I know that sounds crazy, but they are super shiny and super clean. And then some people have asked if you can use them to fertilize plants. And technically, yes, but you never want to put the leaves just on top of the plants because they will mold. What you want to do is take the tea that you brew off a second time and use that to help water your plants because it can have a lot of nutrients. So yes, but no, but yes. All right. So we are almost there. So our toppings, just to remind you, we have the green onion that I've sliced. I have furikake, which we did go over in one of our previous classes. If you weren't with me, then furikake is a seasoning, also called a rice seasoning, where they take the seaweed sheets that you use for sushi, also known as nori, and it's cut down in tiny, tiny, tiny little pieces. You can make this at home. I just use a pair of scissors and chip away. And then they add in some salt, some sugar, and some sesame seeds. And that is your basic nori kumi furikake. There's other varieties that have shisho or powdered shrimp or mushrooms, a bunch of different flavor profiles. When I eat, totally going to be adding sriracha because I like spicy stuff, but you don't have to. But yeah, so we have all of these wonderful toppings we can put on. We get ready to bring our pot of amazing smelling broth over. So when I do them like this, because there's so many elements in our pot, I like to have two things handy because I know we were cooking with this like slotted wooden spoon, but this isn't going to be very practical to serve our ramen or our udon. So I like to have tongs. And let's see. Sorry about that, guys. There is, a ladle. Definitely use a bigger ladle than this, but a ladle. So I'm going to use my tongs to fish out my noodles. Put them directly into the bowl. And if you have leftover noodles somewhere, it's fine. Somebody else will get them in the next portion. I like to put all my noodles in the bottom of my bowl. And then if you remember the wakame, the little dried seaweed that I said likes to expand, each little piece is about that big now. So they get quite large. They look like little seaweed flakes. So now I'm going to use my ladle to put my desired amount of broth on top of my noodles. Like I said, I like it saucy, but I also like to be able to see my ingredients. So I don't want to drown all of my noodles. But I'm still going to put a healthy amount of sauce. And we're going to pretend that my ladle is not comically small. I have a larger one somewhere. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll probably find it before I have to serve dinner. Yeah, so right now, we're actually at a little bit more than a cup of liquid. And then I'm going to take my slotted spoon that I also have in here to add in some more of our ingredients. Just put that all on top. Right. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. So, let me put that right on the spoon. There. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit with my green onion on top. Give it a nice freshness because everything is kind of cooked down. Sprinkle a little bit of furikake. Get a little bit of that nuttiness from the sesame seeds, that salty sweet from the seasoning. And as you noticed, I didn't add any seasoning while this was on the stove, right? No added salt, no added peppers, because believe it or not, this is probably going to be perfectly seasoned where it is, just because all of the ingredients that I've already added have a natural amount of seasoning. But you can always add stuff at the table, right? So we have that. And then for our piece de resistance, we're going to use one of our very beautifully soft boiled tea eggs. And it's gonna have a really soft yolk, as you can see. And I'm gonna put that right on top. All right. Let me see if I can get you guys an amazing view. And that, guys, is our Mai Cha udon / ramen. It looks amazing. Smell-o-vision, food-o-vision. Imagine yourself in my bowl. Oh gosh, I'm so excited to have dinner.
Looks
So that
absolutely delicious.
Oh, I wish I could like send this to you through the camera because it's pretty killer. Not gonna lie, like some might say I do this all the time. This is also just super easy for anybody to do. Honestly, the most difficult part is just how time consuming it can be to kind of pick your ingredients, and sometimes we don't always know how things kind of marry together. So if you do this recipe and you want to play with it, I always tell people start with one ingredient. You know, maybe you follow the Mai Cha, but you change the tea. Or maybe you have Mai Cha, and instead of carrots, you do parsnips. Or instead of mussels, you do chicken. Like change one thing at a time each time you make it until you find your like absolute perfect sweet spot of ingredients that you like. But yeah, thank you for joining in my class. I'm gonna eat this amazing ramen / udon. It's actually udon. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me on the Underground Cooking Club. You can join the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour group on Facebook as well. And then join me next week. The cooking class will be earlier. It's going to be a collaboration effort with the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour. So it'll be one single class because I'll be at someone else's house. And we're going to be doing an aperitivo. So it'll be really nice, refreshing, easy drinks and little snack foods. But thank you for tuning in if you're on Facebook. And I'll see y'all later because I'm going to go ahead and turn off the live. Bye.